Today I'm going to be giving you a training on how to present the safety planning topic to youth. So first things first, we want to talk about our goals for the day. So our goals for today are to learn safety planning basics, as well as understanding specific skills for safety planning in specific locations. So a couple of those things that you will want to talk about today are safety planning at home, safety planning at school, safety planning online, as well as understanding and learning skills for emotional safety planning. Now, going over the goals before you jump into the content is really important because it gives students an idea of the content that is going to be covered throughout the day. And it's just a really trauma-informed way of presenting. So as an introduction to the topic, tell the students that we are going to watch a video. And while they're watching this video, you want them to pay attention to what went wrong and what could have gone better. So ask the students to pay attention to those two questions while they watch this video, okay? So then you'll watch the video and you'll follow up with the students, all right, what went wrong? And you'll get lots of different answers, but some of the things that you need to make sure to bring up or make sure that they say are that, well, everything went wrong. There was a safety plan put into place, but nobody actually knew what the plan was. So this is where you talk about how safety planning, it's important to, one, create a plan, but it's also important that once you create that plan, you know what it is and you know how to use it. Because that's what went wrong in this situation. So what could have gone better is if everybody had paid attention to Dwight's fire safety plan and followed it and understood what was in that plan so that they could get out safely in the event of a fire. So moving into defining what a safety plan is. Ask the students, what is a safety plan? And make sure that you address the definition of a safety plan, which is a personalized plan that a person creates in order to keep themselves safe in a potentially dangerous situation. Okay, so ideally people would safety plan before a dangerous situation happens, but you can also safety plan during or after an event occurs. We want to make sure students understand that it's never too late to create a safety plan. But ask them what an example of a safety plan is that they already have in their lives. Some examples that you might get are a fire safety plan, like their emergency exit plan at school. They practice fire drills so they know how to get out of the building and where to meet in case a fire were to occur. Another safety plan that I like to bring up is, well, what do you do? Ask the question, what do you do when you get in the car? Right? Hopefully they put their cell phone away, they put their seatbelt on, right? Those are all components of a safety plan that they use inside their car in order to keep themselves safe. Okay, so whatever they come up with, whatever idea comes to their mind about a safety plan, that's fine, you can run with them as long as they're connecting with the idea of a safety plan. One of the most important things you want to point out here though, is that a safety plan is customized and personalized, okay? It has to be specific to you. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later and what needs to go into creating a safety plan, but that's really important to point out to students. So now we're going to talk about times when you need to safety plan. So ask the students, what are some times when you think you need to safety plan? They'll probably say fire drill, when you get in the car, things that we mentioned before. But what you need to make sure to point out here is that, you know, we're here from CAPSA, we promote talking about healthy relationships and also want people to be aware of what unhealthy and abusive relationships look like so they can recognize the warning flags and get out of that situation. So we will be talking specifically about other situations that you could use safety planning, like abuse at home or an abusive dating relationship, or even breaking up with a dating partner. Even if that partner isn't abusive, even if it's a healthy relationship, it can still be really beneficial to have a safety plan when breaking up with a person. And that might look like making sure a friend knows where you are and what you're doing, or breaking up in a public place, or if the partner is abusive, maybe that even looks like breaking up over the phone. So you just want to make sure to address some of these things where safety planning could be important to do. But then all-encompassing safety planning comes into handy in any potentially dangerous situation. So now we're going to talk briefly about what an abusive relationship is, because it's important if you are in an abusive relationship to safety plan. So an abusive relationship is a relationship in which there's an imbalance of power and one person is using any of these methods on the power and control wheel in order to gain or maintain power and control over their partner. And you don't want to spend too much time here, because if they want to know more about dating violence or unhealthy relationships, they can request that presentation. So you can have the teacher ask to have you come back and present on that topic. But you still want to give them an idea of what an abusive relationship looks like, because that's kind of what we're talking about. So it's important that they have at least a baseline understanding of what an abusive relationship is, so that that can cue them into maybe when they need to create a safety plan. Okay, so you can go through, ask some examples of the sections in the power and control wheel, what they think it means, and why they think it would be important to safety plan in these situations. So it's important to safety plan in abusive relationships, but it's also important to safety plan for places that you frequent often. So ask the students, where are places that you find yourself the most, or what are places or situations that you frequent? Because if you're there often, you want to make sure that you have a safety plan for those places. So we're going to talk about a couple of those. So we're going to be talking about safety planning at school, safety planning at home, and safety planning online. So for safety planning at school, ask the students what information they would include in their safety plan when thinking about how to keep themselves safe at school. Some good things to bring up are, who can you talk to in the school, right, if you begin to feel unsafe? Or where can you go if you begin to feel unsafe? Who can you call, maybe outside of the school, to come get you if you feel unsafe? And do they know their exit locations and have an emergency exit plan? Okay, and of course this is going to be personal, so remember to keep bringing that theme up through safety planning, that this is personalized, so you have to figure out what works for you, and you have to find trusted people in your life to be able to rely on to include in your safety plan. But those are some questions that you can ask students for safety planning at school. Safety planning at home, some questions to think about are, who can you trust? And maybe that's somebody in the home, but it might also not be somebody in the home. Like, let's say a student is experiencing abuse at home, they might not have a safe person in the home. So get them thinking about who are other trusted people outside of the home that they could ask for help, or that they could go to their house if they needed a place to go. Okay, so these are things that you want to bring up. Another question to ask them are, what are ways to keep safe, right? Maybe that's going to a neighbor's house, or going to a cousin's house, or going to a friend's house. Or maybe it's memorizing phone numbers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then also, do they have an emergency plan? Do they know how to get out? Do they have a bag with some of their essential items in case they need to just grab and go? Okay, so these are some questions that we can ask students about safety planning at home. Another thing that students find to be useful is the creation of code words. Okay, so code words are established words within friends or trusted family members to help cue that person in to a situation where you might need help without blatantly saying the words, I need help. Okay, and this can be useful in many different situations. This can be useful in abusive dating relationships or abusive family relationships. This can be useful for going on a first date or going to a party, right? If you have a safe person, let's say I have a friend and they know I'm going on this first date with a person. And so we talk about this ahead of time and I say, all right, our code word is going to be fabulous, right? So if I call you or if I text you and I say the word fabulous, then you know that I want you to call me in order to say that I need to come home or whatever it might be, or come pick me up, come get me out of that situation, without blatantly saying, hey, can you come get me out of this situation? So this can also be really helpful in if somebody's uncomfortable with what's going on at a party, or if somebody's in an abusive relationship and their phone is being monitored and so they can't directly text a person and say, hey, can you come pick me up? I need help. So using a code word in order to cue that person in to the fact that you need help can be extremely helpful in some of these situations, okay? So students also find code words to be very useful. So make sure you talk through what a code word is and how to use it and how to create a code word, because you don't want it to be a word that you say constantly, right? Or else it defeats the purpose, right? That person might be coming to your aid when you don't really need it. But you also don't want it to be something that's like super extreme or super weird that could cue maybe an abusive partner into like, that's a weird way to use that word in a sentence, or something's not right. So have students be strategic about coming up with their code word. And also when you're discussing code words, it's really important that you tell students, we're going to be talking about code words. Has anybody heard of this before? And then ask them not to share their code word, okay? Because that also defeats the purpose, and you will get students who sometimes be like, I have a code word with my mom, it's fabulous. And you're like, okay, well now you need to come up with a different one because we all know it now. So make sure you bring that up too. All right, the last location that we're going to talk about safety planning is safety planning online. So students might not think about this immediately because it's not a physical location, but it is a space that a lot of people frequently, right? That a lot of people occupy constantly, right? We're always on our phones. We're communicating with other people on our phones. We're finding senses of community on our phones. We're following people we don't know on Instagram or on Snapchat or on other forms of social media. So it's important that we know how to stay safe online. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about. We're going to discuss the concept of a digital footprint. We're going to talk about sharing information online. And then another thing is choosing who to follow, okay? So making a decision about who we are choosing to follow and the impact that that has on our safety and our mental health, okay? So the first thing that we're going to talk about is a digital footprint. So ask the students, what is a digital footprint? Allow them to answer, but what you want to make sure to point out here is that a digital footprint is the idea that anything that you share over social media or through text message or online can leave a digital footprint, meaning it's very hard to keep information private once it's been sent out via text, the internet, email, whatever it might be. So here it's really important that you frame this conversation on knowledge, giving the students knowledge that they need in order to be smart online and not fear, right? A lot of times this conversation is had in a fear way, like don't put things out there on the internet because it can come back and bite you on the butt, or if you put it out there, it's going to be out there forever. While that is a valid concern, we want students to feel empowered and have information so that they can make knowledgeable decisions and not necessarily just try and scare them into something that might not work. So this is just bringing awareness to the fact that it's very, very difficult to keep information private once it's online. So be mindful about the information that you're sharing. Some of the information that you should be mindful of sharing is any personal information. Okay, so your age, where you live, where you go to school, your current location. That's a big one with students right now because a lot of apps have location enabled and people can see where they are. So having students be aware of what apps they're using and whether those apps are keeping track of their location, because those could be used. Nobody needs to know where your immediate location is unless it's, you know, like your parent and it's coming out of a place of concern and wanting to make sure that you're safe, right? Private photos, even sometimes their birthday, right? So when you're explaining this concept to students, you want to make sure they know that you're not saying like this is a hard and fast rule. Don't share any of this information online, and simply be mindful about what you're sharing. If you don't want somebody you don't know to have this information about you, then maybe don't share it online, right? It's just trying to get students to become aware of having a sense of responsibility and accountability for what they're choosing to share online, and, you know, things that they want to make public and things that maybe they want to keep private. Another topic of conversation that's important here is that it's important to be skeptical of people online. Okay, that's a conversation you can have with students. They're pretty well aware of that, but I think it's worth bringing up still. And then be and then giving them a reminder that everything that they share online leaves a digital footprint. So again, being mindful of what information they're sharing online, because their physical safety is important, but their emotional safety is also extremely important, and sharing information that's shared online and somebody's online presence can have an influence on their physical and their emotional safety. So now we're going to talk briefly about ways to keep emotionally safe, okay? Because that's another huge part of safety planning. When you're going through stressful situations or traumatic situations, it's important that you take time to take care of yourself and maintain good emotional health, okay? So a couple of questions that you can bring up to students about, they're asking a couple questions that you can ask students about their emotional safety is, what is making you feel bad? Recognizing what is making you feel bad is the first step, right? And then finding things that you can do to make yourself feel better. So determine what you like about yourself, what makes you feel good about yourself, what you can do to feel better. And then, of course, having a support system. That's another really important thing to point out and really make sure gets across to the students in safety planning, is that people are a huge part of safety planning. Other people, right? Cueing other people into their safety plan, knowing their phone numbers, knowing who they can call. Other people are a huge part of safety planning. So another part of emotional safety planning is identifying people who they feel safe talking to, right? And they feel comfortable coming up to and talking to, when they need help. And then being around positive people, okay, that's always helpful. So not being around people who don't make them feel good about themselves, surrounding themselves with positive people. And this could also be included in choosing who they follow on social media. Okay, that's another really important thing when we're talking about emotional safety, is choosing the content that you are taking in, all right? So now we're going to do a little activity with the students on creating a safety plan. Okay, so after you discuss different times when safety planning is important, now we are going to transition into doing an activity to help students safety plan. So there are a couple ways that you can do this. You can use the Love is Respect online interactive safety plan that's linked in this slide, and you can go through it together with students if you have the ability to access a computer and show and be able to scroll and show the students on the screen what this interactive safety plan looks like. But another option is you can print out specific pages from this safety plan, and you can give one to each student and they can fill out the safety plan. You can give them 5 to 10 minutes, however much time you have left in the class, in order to go through a safety plan and fill it out on their own, because again, it's personalized. So this just gives them a good hands-on activity for figuring out what they would include in their safety plan if they were to make one. Something that's really important to point out here to the students is that if they don't think it's safe for them to have a hard copy of their safety plan, or they don't think it's safe for them to fill out the safety plan in class, tell them they don't have to. Okay, so make sure before you start this activity, you give them the disclaimer that if you don't feel safe filling out this safety plan or having a physical copy of a safety plan around, don't. Okay, that's really important. This is about maintaining safety, and for some people, it's not safe for them to have a written safety plan out where maybe an abuser might be able to find it and see it. So make sure you point that out here. Another thing that you want to mention as we're concluding this conversation, so after students have had the chance to fill out their safety plan, they will notice that there's a lot of spaces for like, who can you call? What's their phone number? What are people you know that you can call, or community services that you can call? So talking about memorizing phone numbers is really important, because sometimes our phones die, right? I know we always have phone in our pocket, right? We have our cell phones, but sometimes our phones die, or sometimes we might not have access to our cell phones. So picking 1 or 2 specific phone numbers to memorize so that they can call that person even if they don't have their phone with them is really important. So tell the students to come up with 1 or 2 individuals and commit to memorizing their phone number, because that can be really important. And so some questions to ask them here is like, who can you call if you feel down or depressed or scared? But then also remembering during an emergency, who could you call, right? So asking students to reflect on, if there's an emergency situation, who are people that they can call? And that might be law enforcement, right? If it's an immediate danger, we always want to point out that calling 911 if somebody's in immediate danger is always what you should do in order to protect your physical safety. So making sure that you bring that up to them. And then sometimes we won't. So it's important to tell students that sometimes they're not the people who are in abusive relationships or in healthy relationships or in tough situations, right? Sometimes it's their friends. So what they can do to be upstanders for their friends. So go through the slide, but the main point of the slide is reiterating, sometimes we're not the people in these situations, but we will know somebody who is or has been and might need some support. And so here are some things that you can do in order to support that person. What I do want to point out here, though, is connecting them to community resources. So it's really important that we connect our friends with community resources like CAPSA. One of the most important things to mention during this presentation is that abusive relationships are complex and they can be dangerous. And so if somebody is in an abusive relationship, it's important that they meet with a professional so that that professional can help them safety plan best for their situation, okay? So while people can do safety plans on their own, if they're in a dangerous situation like an abusive relationship, it can be extremely helpful and sometimes life-saving to have a professional like one of our caseworkers at CAPSA help them safety plan. So as always, CAPSA is here as a community resource.